Hi, everyone. You're listening to Redvolution Rampage. If you're joining us and watching the video on YouTube, hi, welcome. I'm Omar Abdelgawad, and for today's episode, I'm going to be the only co-host here today. However, I am joined today by 4 different members of the hockey community, from players to coaches to fans, who have a stake in players of colors, specifically and more especially Black players in hockey and what's happening around the world today, and especially in the country, United States, and racial justice, and what we can do as hockey fans, hockey personnel, even especially for players and stuff, what we can do to make it more inclusive for everyone, especially players of colors and Black players. I'm joined today by Ayo Adeniye. I want to make sure and Derrick Kirksey. He's a fan. Say hi, Derrick. Sorry, Darius Kirksey. Darius, correct.
Hey, how you doing?
And then Derrick Henderson, hockey coach extraordinaire.
I get around. I've been around a minute.
And we have Malcolm Hayes of the Kansas City Mavericks ECHL team with us today as well. Okay. So, gentlemen, how are you all doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Good, man. Excited to be here.
And we're all having our hearts broken every day by what's happening, what's been happening, what's finally coming to light. And there's a lot of injustice in the world towards personnel of color, especially Black people in Black communities in the United States. There's a lot of injustice in policing people's behaviors, and we've kind of put it under a blanket for years, and it's boiled up, and people are wondering, what can we do? So I want everyone's perspective, their story of how, especially in the world of hockey, what are some things that we've experienced in the past that we shouldn't be blowing away anymore?
Which one of you boys wants to start?
We'll start with you, Ayo.
Oh boy, I wrote them down. I have a couple things. So honestly, racism in hockey has been going on since I started playing hockey. But one of the big things that I wanted to touch on with everything happening now was there was an incident when I was playing juniors. My big thing today is I don't want to mention any names or anything like that, because I'm trying to educate more than discipline people.
Absolutely. There has to be a route back for people. I think one of the things I've seen is that a lot of people lash out when they're called out instead of taking the opportunity to learn and grow. So I want to make clear, hey, if this applies to you, there has to be an opportunity to grow as an individual and come back to being a good person if you find yourself on the wrong end of this. Go ahead, Ayo. Sorry.
100%. There was a alter. I wouldn't even call it the altercation. It was after practice. I was playing junior hockey in New Jersey, and one of my teammates decided to Snapchat me a picture of himself in blackface, basically. And all he said as the caption was, "I am you." I didn't bring this up to anybody until maybe 2 weeks ago when everything started to surface. I showed the picture to my mom. I was like, this happened when I was younger. I tried to assess the situation when it happened. Because when it happened, I know most of you guys are familiar with hockey court, where like once a week you guys will all go in the locker room, do court. I pulled the picture up, showed my teammates, I was like, this isn't acceptable. Like, this isn't cool. And they all laughed about it. They were like, what do you mean? It's kind of funny. And in return, instead of me finding the kid, I got fined. So like that kind of shut me out of the whole trying to use my voice and tell people that stuff isn't okay. But 2 weeks ago or last week, I sent the picture back to the kid and I was like, do you remember this? And more than anything, he didn't understand he did anything wrong. He was like, yeah, that's just locker room talk. That was funny. And I was like, no, that's not okay. So coming from that, I actually made the kid educate himself on blackface, that whole aspect of everything. And he actually typed me an apology paper, 3 pages, like he felt remorseful. And I feel like that would have been better. My mom was just he plays Division I hockey. My mom was just going to send the picture to a school. And I'm like, that isn't going to do anything but ruin his life. And he won't understand. So I feel he educated himself more and it was a better situation.
Awesome, man. I mean, terrible situation, but the way you handled it, though, I mean, that's the way, to handle it.
For sure.
Absolutely, Coach. I think the touch ties back to how do we react when we are faced with racism, and does that play a role? And I'm not saying it's on us. It's on everyone, especially other individuals, to ensure that they're doing the right thing and not doing racist. But how can we teach people to become anti-racist, not just not racist?
I think that comes from like the education point of like what it brings, the history behind it. Like, for example, the blackface, like he doesn't understand like why that would make you upset. So you need to educate them on the history and like just to see how far we've come and just see why that's such a bad thing. Like why there's just no need for racism at all. So I think the first thing is just educating on like the history of African Americans being Black in America, really. Because I know a lot of us don't know about African American history. Like it's not taught in schools. So where else are you going to learn it? And you're not going to know to like go find it because how would you know? You know, it's not talked about at all.
And then this is kind of weird if you haven't picked up on this already. Ayo and I know each other from Columbus. We had a situation a couple of years ago. Ayo came up through the Columbus Ice Hockey Club, which is a great organization. And we had a situation where I was working with their JV hockey team and we were playing another high school. And, you know, somebody threw out a slur on the ice. So, of course, as most of us have been in the situation, in that moment, you snap, you know, and to the player's credit, you know, he kind of composed himself and got himself back in and there was no retaliation, but it was one of those situations like it was undeniable. So how do you react to that? And so immediately after that game, I'll say his name, John Haferman, runs the Columbus Ice Hockey Club program. He reached out to the other team and he got the two teams together. And we all sat down, coaches and players, and these are young 8th, 9th, 10th graders. And we had a discussion like, hey, this is the situation. This came up. This is why this cannot happen. So that was a situation that could have been a lot worse. But to Malcolm's point, you know, we didn't call anybody out. We didn't, you know, chastise, but it was an education thing. Like, this is why you cannot do that. Funny thing is this program ends up having a couple of players of color come through their organization now a year, 2 years later. So you can kind of see the growth in how that one incident kind of leads to a change in a program. So that was a great thing to be a part of that way with the re-education.
Yeah. And I think to go off what you said, I think one thing even though this is hard to say because it comes from a place of where you've been hurt for, you know, years and years. But I think also as Black people, we have to kind of not necessarily show empathy, but we can't be as quick to lash out when we do face racism because you know how everybody gets exposed. And now what you see is a lot of people, when they do get exposed, they typically end up losing everything, which, I mean, I guess if you react, you feel good because it's like you're not letting racism stand. But like he said before, you're not teaching anybody anything. And I think that's where we have a hard time of seeing it because it's like we're so fed up with the hatred and the anger that all we want to do is just, even though we're not lashing out necessarily with hatred, we're lashing out by, you know, like you said, literally destroying somebody's complete life, taking their job, their whatever they have going for them. And the way companies now are set up, they understand, you know, you can't tolerate it. So I think we have to find a better solution when it comes to figuring out a way to educate, still express that same frustration with them, but at the same time, not necessarily, I wouldn't say ruin, which I mean, it's hard to, in that moment when you face it, it's kind of hard. It depends on your level of, I guess, how you can process, but you know, you can't tell somebody how to process, but figuring out a way to condemn, but also teach without it being so far off. Cause like you see now, like you said, if you go even on Twitter, you just see their responses immediately to send to somebody's job. And, you know, by then that person's lost their job, lost their school and everything. So it's one of those things where you have to find the middle ground. I don't know the word for it.
Yeah.
The middle ground, that place where you can teach, educate, and like I said, have that route back. Have that route back from, hey, the ability for them to grow. Because if now they've lost all of, you know, their jobs, their livelihood, and everything, because of that, I would say that we would like for them to go, oh man, I did a bad thing and I paid the price. But a lot of times it's going to be those people ruined my life. Those people forced me to cost me my everything. And now that hate becomes even more ingrained and more sunk in. Is that the right way, or is it the right way to approach it? We do want them to see them pay the price. But the question is, how steep should that price be? Should it be something where they cannot come back from, or should it be something that they can? Like, let's take for example, we've had instances in the NHL. Let's talk about someone who's a little closer to Carolina Hurricanes, Bill Peters, and Akeem Alou. In that incident, there, he lost a job with the Calgary Flames. However, it was brought up to Ron Francis. Not Ron Francis, sorry. It was brought up during that the Ron Francis thing was a different incident where he kicked someone in the back of the head or something like that. But I'm talking about earlier in that it was brought up. Like Akeem Alou brought it up and he said, hey, this is and it almost felt like nothing happened and life went on, and it almost seemed like Bill Peters didn't learn. So where is the middle ground of, hey, we don't want to ruin this person's life because we don't want him to forever teach his children and their children that these people are the reason why your lives are terrible. But instead, how can we find that middle ground to where they can't also like, well, nothing happened, moving on.
Go ahead, Derek. I'll go after.
I was about to say, I think, it's shown a lot. It's said a lot. I think this is where, we really, I hate to use the phrase, but it is what it is, where we need our white allies to kind of step up and help with that. Because to Ayo's point, here's a situation where he's hurt, he's feeling kind of isolated, and he wants to educate. He brings it up, hoping he gets that support, and he doesn't get that support. So no lesson is learned. So now, how do you rectify that? And in Ayo's case, and in a lot of our cases, when that's happened, the Akeem Alou situation, now he feels like he's an other. Now he's more insular and into himself because he has no backup. I've been lucky, and I've not played high-level hockey, but in my time of playing hockey as a player, I've only come across like one or two, racial incidents on the ice. And the one time it really came up, like the guy didn't realize what he said. He just said what he said as if it was a throwaway line. And then he realized, and I'm a goalie, so I'm in full gear. So it wasn't until he realized, like, oh, wait, there's a black guy on the ice, and his tone changed immediately because he recognized, like, no, I cannot do that. He self-checked himself hard. And the only other time it's come up with me is I've had those players who say, yo, dude, you cannot do this. So I didn't even have to be the one to step up and say anything. I had teammates who had my back so that I could just be like, okay, we're good. I can move past this because I know other people are going to take care of this for me. If you don't have that backup, man, it's hard. It's hard to reach that ground.
Yeah.
You say white allies and backup. I want to say you're trying to because you don't like the word white back, but that's society, right? That's the whole society. If whole of society can say, hey, that's not right, or hey, you can't be saying stuff like that, that it's not appropriate in our society as Americans or as Canadians or as hockey community. That's when we know that we're doing the right thing. We're on the right pace. It's not white allies, not white allies. It's anyone in earshot really should be like, no.
Yeah.
I think that's the good part about everything that's happening now. It'll only take time to actually see if people follow through with just making signs and walking down the street and actually check people. But like, I think that something is going to start to change a little bit. And to get back into the educational side, I'm hoping that I'm not saying we go and we educate teams every week, but I'm saying before we start the season, we sit them down and we have a 30 to 45 minute conversation about diversity in hockey, what you can and can't say. And that's a USA Hockey mandated thing to do, and Hockey Canada mandated thing to do. So the incidents start to fall down until there aren't anymore. That would be my biggest solution, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it also takes a little onus upon themselves as well. Like, you got to go out and do your own research. Because I know, like, I was watching today on church today, and the guy at the church that I was watching, the original pastor of the church, he was talking about how he ended up adopting some black children. So he said he took upon himself to go out and research, you know, like some of the things that have happened to black people in America, just to, you know, better educate yourself, because at the end of the day, we can only do so much educating, I feel like, as well. We have to, the onus also switch back to that person to go back and do research for themselves and understand for themselves, because unfortunately ignorance falls upon the ears of those who don't want to listen. And so if they don't want to listen and you can do as much education as you want, then it kind of goes with the, you know, you're beating a dead horse. But I feel like that's where people have to have empathy and compassion, you know, to want to understand another person's thing. Because, I mean, I feel like even if you haven't been faintly paying attention to what's going on, but if you have even just to look at the difference in, you know, where people live, you can kind of see what has been talked about by black people is not something that's been made up. It's something that's been lived, and it's actually true. It's not like some fairy tale they're making up about everything, like oppression, not even having the same opportunities and stuff like that. So I feel like that's something that just has to be also cast. It's both sides, you know, education, but also they have to have the onus to educate themselves if they want to be a part of the solution, because, you know, we can only do so much. We can only change so much as minorities and people of color and black people. So I
think that's what's like great about this movement. Now I got a chance, like I asked my grandma, because like it really like shocked me one day when I was just watching the news. I was seeing all these all the riots and stuff. And y'all ever seen the movie Straight Outta Compton when they're rioting and they're in the watch and they hold up the flags together? And I see a picture of that on Twitter. I'm like, dang, like we really living through this again 20 something years later, 30 years later. And I asked my grandma, I was like, do you think it's ever going to change? You notice anything different like from now and then? She was like, well, before then it was just blacks, you know, like not rioting, but protesting. Now it's everybody, like everybody's fed up with it. And that's what's great about it now. And that's why I think something's actually going to change, because everybody's seeing it. It's not just one side anymore. And people are actually open into listening and actually seeing like what we've been going through for hundreds of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Malcolm, so you've played in Fayetteville with the Marksmen and other places, but you transitioned over to Missouri and Kansas City. Now, Fayetteville is has a healthy African American community, and there's a little bit more understanding down in Fayetteville. Compare that to Missouri and Kansas City. Fan interaction with the players. Right.
Yeah.
We've heard all the stories from Kevin Weeks. We've heard all the stories from guys like Anthony Stewart and PK Subban and stuff. Bananas thrown on the ice. All sorts of I can't comprehend nonsense. How can we as fans be better?
That's tough, because you know it's like throwing a banana on ice. You know, what do you do about that? Like, you know, you're not supposed to do that. You know that's hurtful, and you're sending the wrong message to like kids around that's watching you do that. So, I mean, it's hard to say like, all right, I need to educate this person on why you shouldn't throw a banana on the ice while a black person is skating by. Like, it's kind of hard to do. But I noticed like I didn't have any problems with like fans except for one time this year when somebody called me Willie Mays Hayes and told me I should have played baseball, and I thought that was funny. But
at least it wasn't basketball.
Because
at least it wasn't basketball.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen a lot of people tell players of color, really, what are you doing in our sport? Who's our?
Well, I think that's the funny thing about it. It's like I'm kind of good at it, you know. So I'm here. So you're gonna have to deal with it.
Right.
A little known fact for anyone out there: Malcolm Hayes got a KO his first hockey fight. So do not go 1-on-1 with him.
Ayo
You
too.
too, Ayo? Ayo too. So, this one's for you, Darius. Because we're in the stands. We're not on the ice with the rest of the gentlemen here. We're in the stands, and we see these conversations happen, and we see these fans shout out slurs, and especially when the heat of the moment, like, you know, an opposing player that you don't really like, say PK Subban is crushing your team on the ice, you know, you'll see people in the heat of the moment say stuff. I think as fans, we have to police that. When I say police, I mean like, hey man, you can't be saying that, or even like, you know, even doesn't have to be a person of color saying that. I'm talking to all fans out there. Call your buddies out because you don't have to, you know, embarrass them, but say, what? Why would you say that?
No, I agree completely. I know personally, as many times as I've been to PNC, I haven't heard it, but I'm pretty sure it goes on. And my thing is, I feel like when it comes to saying stuff like that, I feel like that comes as much as you don't want it to be. I feel like even though some people say in the heat of the moment, that sometimes comes from a place of the heart. So you just have to check your heart as well in that moment. And you have to check your friends because, like, I think now, like I say, I feel like now more days you probably won't experience it to the extent of that. But I feel like now people will start to check people for it. But I'm pretty sure there's been plenty of time, especially like when it comes to like the playoffs and stuff. I know we just got back to the playoffs last year, but even I'm pretty sure when the years that Kevin Weeks was here, I'm pretty sure there's probably stuff staying in the fans about him. If he let in a goal that wasn't, you know, that wasn't something that needed to be said. And we as fans, like you said, we have to be able to, especially in Raleigh, even if you go anywhere else, but you want Raleigh to be a safe environment for people of all colors, races, and, you know, sexualities. You don't want to be known, like you see how now with baseball, even like the way people are talking about Boston, like black players come out and say Boston's been, you know, I get called the N-word by little kids and their parents or, you know, grown folks are standing right beside them and they're not saying anything. You don't want that stigmatism and that label on your arena where you call home, and where, you know, some players, especially if we're having more minority and more black players and, you know, minority players coming up through the, you know, the rankings, you know, when it comes to free agency, you never know, like these guys on the call here, if they're still playing and they get up to that level, you know what, if they have a decision to make as signing as a free agent somewhere, you know, like, okay, I know I've heard from a few fans, I've heard incidents in this arena where, you know, there's, you know, racial slurs being said around. It's like, you don't want to go play somewhere where you feel like just because you have a bad play or bad shift that, you know, you're going to be called out of your name and have something disgraceful said at you. So all that goes into the culture that you're building with the arena. You want your culture to be healthy, because the more healthy your fan experience is, the more better players come. And then the better players, obviously you get more championships. So I think all that ties into, you know, creating a safe environment, not only for fans, but players as well. And if your fans don't stick up for each other and don't protect the people that come and pay to see the same team that they're watching, then you're going to end up where you don't have situations where people don't want to come play, get negative reviews. And then from there, you know, who knows what happens. You start having, you know, people who want to, you know, not support the team in the community. And I don't think people realize, you know, the fan support goes just as much as the on-ice performance. And if your fans don't feel safe, then you might as well just go ahead and pack up the team and move to another city.
Yeah. And who was it? Hunter, who said that he doesn't sign. Every contract he signs has a no move clause to Boston, specifically Boston. And you know, I've heard. I'm a baseball fan. I'm a Yankee fan. Don't boo. But I've heard CC Sabathia say that he does not like playing in Boston, or or I've heard other players say they completely zoom out people who are in the stands in Boston, because if they didn't, they'd be upset all the whole time. And the question is, do we really want that in hockey? Right? I mean, shame on Boston, first of all, and they should do everything in their efforts to try to remove that stigma. But we can't build, and that stigma exists in hockey. And I feel like a lot of young black athletes who have a choice, like hockey, basketball, baseball, football, it's there for them, especially if they live in areas where it's hockey rinks and stuff are more accessible. And that's another thing that maybe we'll talk about, like how the accessibility of hockey to the black community, to communities of color. And they think to themselves, do I want to play someplace where I will be accepted for who I am no matter what, or a place where I'm going to feel a lot of vindication, a lot of attacks just for existing? And I want to let's circle back on availability of hockey to communities of color, and I think Coach Henderson here can probably tell us more about what we can do to make that happen.
Derek, can I hop in after you? So
Actually, Ayo's great to start off with because he came up through that program. I can piggyback off of you, Ayo, because I mean you're the example here.
Okay. Well, I did start playing my hockey with the Columbus Ice Hockey Club, which is a NHL diversity hockey program. So I know we were trying to talk about a little bit of gatekeeping in hockey with POCs and black people. Growing up, I don't know if Malcolm can attest to this, but I really didn't have that big of a problem seeing people that looked like me playing hockey, which I guess made me more comfortable when I did start playing higher level hockey and I saw less people like me, because I could always go back to the Columbus Ice Hockey Club where I had a group of kids that looked like me. And I feel like more than anything, hockey's really expensive, but if the NHL does want to expand itself, they can do a good job by adding a couple more NHL diversity programs, because they really like – the only reason I'm playing NCAA Division I hockey is because of the Columbus Ice Hockey Club. So things like that, I feel, are a very, very, very big way you can get more minorities, and if not even minorities, people that can't afford hockey into hockey.
And then to kind of piggyback off of that, I'm obviously older than Ayo. I grew up in the 80s. So 87, 88 was about when I started really becoming knowledgeable about hockey. And it was Grant Fuhr and Pokey Reddick, and that was it. That's who I had. And I started as a goalie, you know, so that it was immediate. Those were the two names that were thrown out at me. And for me, I grew up in a Philadelphia suburb. So, you know, the Flyers are obviously huge. So it wasn't a big deal for me to jump in. And again, I had a really good, really close bunch of friends that I felt secure, you know, growing up playing street hockey with my friends and roller hockey with my friends. But moving to Central Jersey, where at the time hockey wasn't huge, because hockey in New Jersey at the time was north by New York or south by Philly, and the middle of the state was just isolated. So, you know, when I'm walking into the rink, it's me. I'm the guy. So, you know, I'm getting the look, the what are you doing here? Okay, let's see if this guy really knows what he's doing. And then obviously once you realize, okay, dude can play, usually you're good. Oh, that's just D. He can play. He's good. He's solid. And then I went to school at Bowling Green and at BG. I was that guy. I set foot on campus, and the black community in Bowling Green, oh, you're the black hockey player from Jersey. Like they knew, you knew. But again, I had those guys where they kind of brought me in. And I mean, I walked into Bowling Green with the absolute worst gear, the worst equipment, because I didn't play growing up. But those guys took care of me and they nurtured me. And you hear stories like, you know, Wayne Simmons and I'm thinking of a couple of other players. I mean, the Stewart brothers, where they had a similar situation where they had people that realized we need to help and we need to nurture these guys before, as Ayo mentioned, you know, the NHL really went hard on the diversity program and trying to reach out to those kids. It was hard. It was absolutely hard. And so I think, yeah, just trying to ramp up even what they've been doing is going to be something that helps. And I think a big thing, and this is just me personally, and I don't know how Ayo feels about this, I think it helps when you have other coaches like myself that look like me, yep. Because it's not just okay, I've got the kids to play with. It's okay, I can't be Ayo and go play D1, or I can't be a couple of the guys that he's played with that are now working their way up through junior, but I can coach. I can give back. I can do more. And I think that that's something that can be built on, because I do these USA Hockey coaching clinics, and I am the one. I'm the only guy there. So on top of just getting the players in, get the people like Darius who maybe aren't a player, but maybe they get into coaching, you know, try to reach out that way. Maybe refs, anything to keep the guys that like me that are hockey junkies that want to be involved, but maybe we're not the players. There's nothing being done on that level.
And see, that's actually the reason why I stopped playing hockey, because I started out here in Raleigh at the Iceplex, but, you know, I was doing, you know, club for a little bit, club at the house, like the ice house, you know, house league basically. And then when it came to, you know, asking to play travel, you know, you get that travel cost, and especially if it's not something that, you know, as a family, especially a black family, those travel costs, you know, you're not prepared for it. So I remember for the longest, I was trying to figure out if I could do travel hockey, but I couldn't, obviously, because we just couldn't afford the price of, you know, just the registration fee, let alone for travel hockey was, you know, that was a couple $1,000. I'm trying to remember what it was at the time. I think it was like I don't even remember how
Crazy.
much the Iceplex charged us. Was going to charge for just registration. It was going to be a couple thousand, but so that was like the reason like I didn't even continue playing travel league hockey. But the crazy thing is, yeah, that's fine. The crazy thing is my little cousin now, he plays hockey up in New York. And my uncle, his father was actually the one that introduced me to hockey. He played hockey at the University of North Dakota, but like him now, even seeing him go through the hockey ranks, like his equipment, like being that he was able to get into a good program in New York, like his equipment, you can see how if you have the availability and access to just the equipment, you can take your game a lot further, or even have the ability to pay, like I said, the registration, it can go a lot further. But I know for me, that was like the reason why I didn't continue playing like ice hockey was, the cost aspect. I think that's
prohibition.
Yeah.
That's why I never played except as an adult is exactly what Darius was saying. My parents took one look at the cost, and I'm a goalie, so all the equipment, all the sign up, and I played every sport possible growing up as a kid. They were just like, no, that's why I played street and roller as a kid. And then when I, transitioned to ice in college, there was nowhere for me to go. So I jumped into coaching after that. But yeah, that cost scares a ton of people. It's hard.
It is. I think it's in some places, and sometimes I think it's just way too overpriced. And like Derek said, even if you can't play, I think getting involved as like a coach or a ref would be huge. Just for other younger players to see somebody who looks like them is one of the biggest things. Growing up, I was playing in Georgia, so I didn't see somebody who looked like me in a hockey rink besides my dad till 8th grade when I left to go billet and play in Detroit. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things for a lot of young kids. They probably feel a little lonely, or might even get, in some instances, you might get made fun of for playing hockey and being a black kid. It's like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah, you made fun of by both people, black and white.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love what we're coming up with here today. That diversity hockey programs. I think it has to be one for each NHL team, not just Columbus. The Carolina Hurricanes had their first goal program, which is a great way for families to have a lot of those costs covered. But I think it's not enough. I think there has to be a diversity program as well. There is a rich, diverse community around the Raleigh area, around in North Carolina, from all the way down to Fayetteville to all the way up to the Virginia border. And I'm pretty sure almost every single team can say something similar, from Dallas to Edmonton.
Can I jump in just real
go
quick
ahead.
on that?
Yeah.
Because you're on the right path. I think every team does have some sort of branch where they do reach out. I don't think they advertise nearly enough.
That's
nearly enough. Because I came to Columbus, and Columbus hockey has grown so much. But I started coaching in Columbus with a house league. And then as I kind of, moved around and jumped around and got into more places, I get approached by people who just at, a stick and puck or a drop in, or they see me with my bag and sticks and, hey, I've got a kid that wants to play. Where can I go? So I'm constantly throwing out CIHC, go to this, look at this place, look at that place. But then the question comes back to, how do they not know that these places exist? I grew up in, like I said, a Philly suburb. I didn't know about the Ed Snyder hockey program till I actually left Philadelphia. You know what I mean? And it's huge, and I'm a huge Flyers fan, so of course I know about it. But I don't think, like, if Columbus is my immediate thing, I just don't think they advertise that enough to let parents know and let kids know that these programs are out there. I think that's a huge thing that they could do.
Yeah. Now, Derek, I'm a marketer by trade, and to your turn, advertising costs. And there's costs to that, but that cost has to be attributed into the program, right? And not only that, there's multiple ways to advertise the program outside of your traditional venues. You take these players, you bring them out between periods. You put them in other places. You make the program as visible as humanly possible.
At the rink, just because if people are going to the rinks to skate and whatever, put flyers up at the rink. Hey, if you're interested, look at this program. Hey, if you're interested, look at that program. I think we just started recently we have 4 different youth house programs. And for the first time, maybe a couple years ago, they finally all just started kind of linking together as one kind of unified voice, as opposed to, oh, if you live in this area of town, you go to this place and you don't interact with any of the other rinks. Oh, if you live in this part of town, you're in this group, and maybe, you play against each other, but you really have nothing to do with that other group. Where now, they're all kind of starting to combine themselves. So if you have those kids that, hey, I don't know where I belong, or I don't know where to go, or hey, where can I get started? You know what? We know this group here on this side of town. They'll take care of you. Oh, we know this group on this side of town. They'll take care of you. Even just that little holistic of just where can you go for more info helps.
Right. I agree.
Advertising on social media too would be huge, especially in this day and age too. I feel like every NHL team has at least 1 million followers on their Instagram. And then they also have the Twitter too that has hundreds of thousands of followers too. So that could definitely be used to spread the programs around and get more notice about them.
Absolutely. And I think that's our call to action right there is we just have to make hockey more accessible to the communities of color, especially Black communities. And the programs that do exist, we need to do a better job of putting it out there and letting people know. And then because I think my biggest takeaway from our conversations today is the more players of color are in the sport, the more action can be taken against racism, and more but to get that to happen, there has to be more places where young athletes of color can feel comfortable and safe and know that they feel like they're on the right track for their athletic careers. And we have to do the best we can to get there. Ayo, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, can I just piggyback off of that and talking about JT Brown for a couple seconds?
Absolutely.
JT Brown is basically the Colin Kaepernick of the NHL. And the sad part is I've always wanted, because my Instagram handle's African Hockey. Like, I am extremely proud of my Black heritage. So I've always wanted to try to speak up about issues and that type of thing. And it's just, I want to say it's terrible what happened to JT, and it is terrible what happened to him. But I feel like that is the, as you would say, call to action to understand that we can use this platform now to change things, because it went really south for him. I don't know if everyone here knows the story about JT Brown. He was playing for the Tampa Bay Lightning before a game. Instead of even kneeling, he said, you know what can I do that's even less offensive? He put his fist in the air. In return, he was sat for that game, sat for a couple games after that, traded, and sent to the AHL.
Oh, he's still not with Tampa?
He is with the Iowa Wild in the AHL.
Yeah.
They kind of ruined his career. I'm not going to lie. So, things like that, seeing that now Colin Kaepernick, this is a time for, like, Malcolm, you, me, to actually use our platform to change the world, change that type of thing.
And to kind of, like, go off what you were saying, like, that was the one thing, like, when this first all started happening, I felt like I should say something on my social media, but at the same time, I feel like I'm not in the position where if I say something that's controversial, like, there's a potential I could never play hockey again.
100%.
Because nobody wants to deal with the extra stuff that I might bring, the outdoor noise. They don't want to have that in the locker room. And that could be the excuse to just completely shun me from the game.
Yes,
so
sir.
that's, like, why guys might be nervous in speaking out sometimes.
I was gonna say,
that threat is completely unacceptable. Like, that, to feel that way, feel that you can't say something without it ruining your career, something good, that cannot be acceptable in our society at all.
Yeah. I was like, have y'all tried? I know y'all actually play, junior pros and whatnot now, but have y'all actually, like, tried reaching out to, like, PK? I don't know if PK is. I don't want to speak on PK because I don't know PK, but does he, like, communicate with? Especially, I don't know if they have, like, a coalition of players within the league, and even coming up through the juniors, like, a coalition of, like, Black players and minority players, to where y'all can have y'all's own. You don't have to be in the league, but just, that ability to have an upline of where you have people that are in the league that y'all can talk. And when it has issues like this, or even not even issues like this, but if y'all want to start a program as a group of, Black players, you all can, have a way to communicate and talk about it and spread it amongst yourselves, because at least, because I feel like PK, he definitely is aware of his stardom and him being Black, and the fact that, he definitely, gets chastised for even bringing up race. But I also think he probably can not necessarily do more, but he can probably use his platform to definitely speak a lot more around the situation. And I feel like, at least from you hearing what you all said, being that y'all do currently play at a higher level than I ever made, but y'all could possibly form some type of bond between the pro players and the players that are coming up through the ranks in college. That way y'all can have that established platform to use, and you can make changes that way.
Malcolm, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you know too many other players in the pro level, and I know Ayo coming up through juniors and now going D1. My opinion as a fan, and strictly as a fan, is I think that was a lot harder to do back in the day, and I think that's a lot easier to do now because there are so many people of color that are playing the sport, where I don't think you actually even had that thought. And until you brought it up, Darius, I'd never thought about it, because there were always a handful. There were always a couple. But now, as I'm sitting there thinking about, well, who would be involved in this? And you can make it to two hands and start on toes. And, there's a bunch of players now that can at least, like you said, get together and talk and commiserate and share, where they're not just that one, So Malcolm, like I said, I don't know if you know of other people, especially playing in the E, but do you see that there's more people in the pro rank where, growing up, like as you mentioned before, like you were the only one growing up, and then,
I've seen a few, like not just a handful though, but I mean, it's definitely bigger than it used to be for sure. And like social media shows that a lot. Like there's a lot of Black hockey players, like even just coming up through the ranks right now. And then there's some like overseas too that you would never think about too, like Swedish Black hockey players. I know a few of them. But I mean, I think that would be huge, just to have like something where we can all talk to each other and just see that there's more guys that look exactly like you playing this game and excelling and doing pretty well at it.
I'm a part of a couple groups like that. We have a couple Snapchat groups. It's called Next Gen Hockey, Black Hockey Family. Like we have a couple. We have a Discord even that has like 60, 70 kids. We just kind of talk, be a little community, that type of thing. The only pro that I talk to about any of this is JT Brown. So like I honestly feel a whole bunch of the pros should step up and kind of help other POCs come up through the ranks, because we only have ourselves until everything starts to change around. We see that everything's starting to change, but until then, we've only had ourselves. So yeah.
Change won't happen overnight, and you're right. Like as a community, we need to start learning. I don't want to say relying on ourselves, but to make the voice louder. Unite that voice, because JT Brown, by himself raising his fist is an easily removable obstacle. However, an entire community of players speaking out is a different story. It's why unions exist. And it's not a matter of, we're gonna make our own thing and everyone else is not included, but it's about unifying that voice and making sure that voice does get heard and not ignored and pushed off to the side.
Right.
I think that's a great issue, because I'm Egyptian American. There's not a lot of Middle Eastern players, but Brandon Saad, he's half. Yeah, Nika Zibanejad, even though he's technically Swedish.
The name doesn't Swedish.
His parents are of Iranian descent. You have other players. The Asian American community have their players coming up. You got the Suzuki brothers coming up through the minors now, and then among other players. So there's a lot of players of color going up through the hockey world, and there should be more. In 2020, there should be more. And I feel that the community of players of color have been failed in the past. And so, honestly, at this point, we got to do the full Thanos, get the hand in the glove, and say we'll do it ourselves. So, thank you guys really so much. I think this is probably the healthiest discussion about this that's taken place in the last few weeks.
Man. Thank you for having us and putting this on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this a lot.
To use your voice. So.
Appreciate it.
For everyone listening, we've had a great conversation. Thank you so much to Coach Derrick Henderson, Ayo, and Malcolm. Ayo's playing NCAA, Malcolm's playing ECHL, and of course my buddy and good friend here, Canes fan Darius, for coming on. I think this has been probably one of my favorite episodes of Redvolution Rampage. Coming up after this, I have 3 different testimonials from other fans of color in the hockey community. So they have some powerful words, and I want you to listen to what they have to say.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Moore, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what hockey means to me as a black gay man, and how can we make it more inclusive for others. So hockey has always been a big part of my life, even from when I was younger. I had always struggled with my identity, and going to hockey games just gave me something to focus on. It took away from the daily struggles that I had to go through. And some of my best memories come from experiencing hockey with friends and family. So that's why hockey has always been an important part of my life. And saying that, I know that hockey, quite frankly, is not for everyone at this moment. And ways that we can change that are by having more accountability in terms of holding friends, family, and other hockey fans accountable when they say racist or homophobic or transphobic things around the rink. Having accountability in those spaces will help to make those spaces more inclusive for more people.
Hey, Redvolution Rampage. Thanks for letting me submit to your show. I've been listening the past couple days, and I really like your stuff. My name's Kaveen. I'm a social worker in Cincinnati, Ohio. Right now I'm working as a mental health therapist. I'm a huge Blue Jackets fan, and I'm a big advocate for social change. And I wanted to talk a bit about what hockey means to me as a fan of color. So I've been a huge NHL fan for maybe about 3 years now, and I think one of the things that really drew me into the game, and honestly some of this might have been subconscious, I didn't even realize it until recently, was that it was like almost a perfect recreation of the culture and the world I grew up in. And there's something about watching hockey that really reflects my story back to me. It is actually really healing and inspiring. So I was the first person to be born in the United States from my family. We originally came from India. I grew up in a predominantly white middle-class suburb, and it was maybe like 95% white, so there was a handful of kids around that looked like me. And as a person of color, you'll probably be able to relate to this experience of feeling that you're really different, you stand out, you're the only brown person in a room, people can't say your name right, they might tease you, or you might deal with some other forms of racism. And as they say in hockey, you're kind of forced to find your grit and stand up for yourself, and stand up for the right to be you. And make a lane for yourself. And I feel like a lot of that just comes back up every time I watch a hockey game. So of course when I watch the game, I'm totally hooked on it itself, because hockey's like the most engaging sport in the world. The speed, the skill, the fact that you're literally flying around on razor blades, doing outstanding skill maneuvers. But then there's the stories themselves of the players of color and the handful of non-white players we have in the league that are also existing and doing their thing in this predominantly white structure. So yeah, when I see players like Wayne Simmons, PK Subban, Dustin Byfuglien, Devontae Smith-Pelly all work through that same issue, I think there's something really healing about it. Just to see them kind of build a home for themselves and try and be comfortable existing in a place that never really feels like it was meant to house you or doesn't understand you. So yeah, there's something about seeing the two layers happening at the same time. Like the beauty of the game, the cup, the playoffs, the excitement, all taking place, again, like within a world where we honestly struggle with individual difference. Like if you read Akeem Alou's Players Tribune article, you'll know exactly what I mean. So when I see that, I definitely see my life in that. I see all the things I loved as a kid, my friends, my neighbors, my first crush, but I also see the complicated world that it all existed in. Like people just sort of, stereotyping me, especially after 9/11, being afraid of minorities, being compelled to bully me because they thought I was weaker or different, all happening at the same time. So it reminds me of this kind of, I feel like I belong here, but I feel like I don't feeling. And to see them manage that, but also push for change at the same time is like really, really inspiring. And it's probably something that takes me from being a casual fan of the game to being somebody who's now deeply in love and invested in the game. And yeah, as a therapist, I think I'm maybe attracted to things that are really challenging to make changes in, but still can be done, and that's what hockey feels like to me. Like I really see how beautiful it is, so it really calls me in to go and do work in any way I can to kind of roll up my sleeves and make the culture more accepting. Hey, so maybe that was a deeper or lengthier spot than you wanted, but I hope you found what I had to say interesting. I don't know if every person of color sees the game the same way I do, and maybe there's some white fans that even see the game maybe from the same lens, but yeah. If you want to see anything I'm working on, I do have a hockey card collection that highlights players of color. And if I'm allowed to self-promote, if not, you can just edit this out. It's on Instagram, and it's called Herbie's Revenge. That's HERBYS _ and then the word revenge. It's named after Herb Carnegie. He was one of the most talented black hockey players and hockey players period at the time, but he was excluded from the league, and the racism was so blatant back then that the Toronto Maple Leafs GM actually said, you know what, if anyone could turn him white, I would sign him tomorrow, and he allegedly offered them a sum of money as a joke to turn him white. So we do have work to do in hockey, and I'm hoping that that collection can do just a little bit to help change it for the better. Anyways, thanks guys so much. I really appreciate this chance to get my voice out there, and I love the work you're doing, and stay with it. I should mention that my backup team is the New York Rangers, so if we do end up playing, I'd say to the Canes, good luck, and hopefully that will be a really entertaining series. Alright, thanks everybody. Have a good one. Bye.
My name is Mike, and I want to answer the question, why is hockey important to me as a black American hockey fan? The answer for me is that I've found things in myself through hockey that I didn't know existed. I was introduced to the game almost 30 years ago when I changed elementary schools. I was a young black kid in a predominantly white school in a predominantly white class, but I was a sports fan. And lucky for me, I was able to connect with a number of my classmates through sports, particularly the Philadelphia Flyers and hockey. I loosely followed the game in the ensuing years, and as an adult, my wife and I decided to move to San Jose, California, to pursue a job opportunity from Philadelphia. Didn't really have any friends out here, didn't really know what to do, and I was looking for connection and activities. Ended up going to a few Sharks games. I was reintroduced through a colleague at work to roller hockey, and then at 35 years old, I decided I wanted to try ice hockey for the first time. I'd skated before, but I had never really skated, if you know what I mean. So I decided to take a beginner hockey class and join an adult hockey league. I've been playing for the past 5 years almost weekly. I became an assistant captain for my adult rec league team, and through that I learned about leadership and showing up. And yeah, I stood out. I stand out on the ice, I stand out when I go to games, I stand out in the locker room, but I realized through leading authentically and being my authentic self that I am bringing something to the game of hockey, and I actually think I'm helping hockey grow as a sport. Fully admit that hockey culture isn't perfect and there's a lot of work to do, but I think through our enjoyment of the sport and bringing ourselves to the sport, we're actually making it better for everyone.